All right. Welcome everyone to another episode. Mike Plachter, that flipping accountant, and I got a really special guest today, Michael Pinter, someone I really look up to in this industry, another fellow real estate investor, um, almost like a mentor. I'm always watching your videos on YouTube and stuff, and I consider you almost like a mentor, even though we're not like technically mentor-mentee relationship. But really excited. You're the owner of RPB Realty, as well as Real Property Buyers. And like I said, big investor in Nassau, Suffolk County on Long Island. Michael, so how you doing? Thanks for coming
I
on.
am good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the warm and kind words.
All right, so I guess can you tell this? We'll start like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into real estate?
Sure. So I am 53. I started dabbling in real estate 20 years ago in 2004. So I worked for the same mortgage company for 17 years, from 1997 until 2013. Um, I should have got out around 2009, but I stayed there. Same company, company's still around. And I was I mean, money was so easy to come by before 2008, 2009. I bought a few investment properties. And what happened soon after that, and after about 2010, 2011, is I was sort of dabbling and going into real estate full time. And uh, I was doing something in ancillary in the mortgage business. I sort of created a consulting company to help people in the mortgage business. And I sort of figured one of these two things is going to work out. And the mortgage consulting business ended up being a disaster, and like all my clients had different reasons all dropped me one day. And then I had a partner to raise money, and he raised like millions of dollars to go buy properties for the real estate business. So I said, I think this is a sign that I should be going full time into real estate. In 2013, I went full time into real estate, and I have been full time in real estate since then. I am much happier in real estate than I was in the mortgage business, because there was a lot of regulation there, especially after 2008, 2009,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
drove me bananas. So I'm much happier in the real estate business now.
awesome, awesome. Yeah, that was a great time to enter. Honestly, probably towards the bottom of the market. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember 2012. I think that was the bottom. There was a property next door to my parents' house. It was a two family, and I remember like looking because I did want to get into real estate for years. I mean, I only got into it really in 2020, but for a long, long time wanted to get in. Probably should have done stuff earlier, but that's besides the point. Yeah, I just remember being like, oh, this house, two family, I could have got it for like 375,000 or something. And looking back, I just I don't know why I didn't pull the trigger because that thing is probably worth like, I don't know, more
Listen,
than double, for sure.
hindsight is 2020, and
Yeah.
I think that of course we look back at everything. We all should have bought Google the day it came out, also, and Bitcoin 2 years ago. I mean, we can all look at that. So we can't look back and say, what? Why didn't I do it? I think we have to just look at what's around now. We can't go back in time. There's a
Yeah,
million things. I mean, if you bought any real estate 40 years ago, you'd be rich today. So
I know.
can't worry
Well,
about it.
so I guess why so prices were so low, but like what was so now all right, so let me just back up. Like right now we have no inventory, right? Everyone's like, well, we need 5 more million homes just to meet the demand.
Right.
Um, what happened? Like, why was there so much inventory 10 years ago? Like, where did we still have 300 million
So
people in this country? Like, what
I'll tell you
happened?
what. I'll tell you what happened. I mean, because I was in the mortgage business, so I was front and center. What happened was that the bye bye the Wall Street, who's really to blame, and the rating agencies. I can talk about this for 6 hours. Wall Street started buying more mortgages. We were selling 100 million a month to Credit Suisse, First Boston. We were selling
Oh,
tons to UBS, to other Swiss bank,
crazy.
and it was just there was an insatiable appetite from Wall Street for mortgage production. So if you were closing loans, they were buying them.
Mhm.
And what happened for a couple of years, let's say 2004, 5, 6, is that none of those loans defaulted, because the real estate market, and
What's going on?
it's a it's a what's the word I'm looking for?
Cyclical,
Circular
like,
kind of thing, because
yeah,
money was available so easily, everybody was just buying property. So you'd have a bus driver who would buy 27 new condos. You didn't need to show income. You didn't need to show assets. You didn't need to have good credit, and the premium that you would pay, the additional rate that you would pay for a loan where you were showing nothing versus a loan where you were showing everything was minimal. Maybe it was 1%. So the regular rates were, let's say, 6%. And for 7.5%, I can get a loan and show nothing. There were people choosing to show nothing.
Mhm.
And that created an insatiable demand, right? An inflated demand for properties. So prices went up, and one person would have to put $0 down and have no money in the skin of the game to buy 20 properties. So that was absurd,
Mm.
right? And we would look at ourselves and go, "This is crazy. Like we don't say no to anyone."
Right.
And we knew it was nuts. So the company I was in, actually, we specifically created our own matrix where we weren't going to do crazy loans, but there were plenty of people who were doing crazy loans, had no problem with it. I remember we remember one situation. Somebody came to us and said, I was supposed to close yesterday, but I went to the closing and they were lending me 100%. And I wanted to put 20% down and they wouldn't let me put 20% down. So can I get a loan with you and put 20% down? We said, sure. And we could close a loan in like 4 days. It was like
Okay.
four documents you had to sign, get an
Wow.
appraisal done, which appraisals were doing appraisal very quickly, and you can close the loan. So it was a crazy thing. It was inflated demand because of cheap money that had no business being that cheap. And that's what happened. I mean, I lived through it. I remember like it was yesterday.
So, all right. So you have inflated demand. That explains why prices were so high, obviously. And then when they dropped, I guess the banks were then foreclosing on these properties, and there was just excess supply because people had to sell them, and everyone just dumped them on the market. But like with these occupied properties, because where'd the
That's
people
funny.
go?
We didn't have the same thing going on in New York that there were in most of the parts of the world, right?
Yeah.
But what was going on in most of the world, most of the country, was that banks people were just walking away, right? So if I bought 12 condos and then because I thought they were going to be worth more, and now I realize they're going to be worth less, I would just call the bank and go, bye bye. I'm not making payments. I'll sign a deed in lieu. And the banks were looking at this huge amount of product on their books, and they were just selling them, literally putting them out on MLS and just selling them for whatever price
Okay.
that was available. New York never really hit that point, but obviously there were a lot more foreclosures going on. But it
Right.
wasn't like it was in other parts, because I know, because of people that were in the business then, they were telling me they would literally buy something on the MLS from a bank, put it back on the MLS for $40,000 more, and just sell it to a retail investor, a retail buyer. I mean,
Oh, wow. Okay. So you had like just banks unloading, but I'm assuming these have to be occupied properties because if I'm like that
no,
guy who had 12 units, were they like occupied with tenants?
no. Why would he bother with tenants? His goal when he bought them was just to sell them for a profit. Why would he deal with
Oh,
tenants?
so
He
he
never,
was
never.
just like people were just like buying properties vacant and then leaving them vacant, and then they were, hey, they're going to go
Well,
up double next year, and then they were just selling them.
the and it worked for a few years. It's a little crazy, but people could not comprehend the concept that the housing price appreciation would stop. Like that was the music, and
Yeah,
people didn't understand that it would stop. So I mean, there was a famous. I don't know if you saw the movie The Big Short, but there were stories about that where where guys who were questioning what was going on would sit in a big room with 500 people at Bear Stearns or
yeah.
Lehman, who were the leaders, and that's why they're both not around anymore. And the 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 analysts would go, this is what we're assuming. And then one of the guys from the movie got up and said, what happens if home price appreciation, HPA, is negative? And the guy looked at him and said, I don't know, my model doesn't go negative. Right? Like there was no concept that that houses wouldn't appreciate. Maybe they'd appreciate slower, but there was no idea. And that
Wow.
was the house of cards that everything fell on.
Well, people still think that they're like, well, and it's true. Like over time, it's going to go up 3 or 4%. So people just assume like I'll buy it and it's going to be worth more one day, and it probably will be. But that's just
It's a terrible plan, I think, honestly, because if you need the money in 3 years and there's a recession and the prices go down, you're going to get a beating. Like the idea, if you know that you have enough cash to sit with that for 20 years, yeah, you'll do okay. But that doesn't mean you won't need the money in the middle, and it doesn't mean the price won't drop in the middle.
yep.
So it was
That's
a
why like
crazy time.
when I buy rentals, I always say I'm going to buy with equity. I have to have X amount of equity and I have to have X amount of cash flow. And I'll talk to some newer investors or whoever. They're just like, what do you care about the equity? Like if I'm buying it at this number on the, let's say an MLS deal, and I'm buying it and it cash flows, like what do you care? And I'm like, well, what if you have to sell or refinance? Like you're screwed. You have no equity in the deal, and it's stupid.
I
It's not
I
buying a bond. Like you're not buying bonds where it's just you're getting this yield. You're buying an asset that requires me.
that requires maintenance and requires a lot of payments to be made. So yeah, I know guys who I like who have very big businesses who will buy rentals if they're $10 cash flow positive. And I'm like, I don't get that. I don't understand it.
Yeah,
And they're like, why? I'm going to get the appreciation. I go, maybe you'll get the appreciation. I go, but you're one, you're one roof or one even appliance away from being cash flow negative. I don't get that. I'm like you.
yeah,
I need good equity and
cash
I
flow.
need really good cash flow for it to make sense because I owned rentals for a long time. And even when the rental is cash flow positive, a decent amount, 600, 700, $800 a month, you're still only one capital improvement away from being cash flow negative, and I can't stand that. Like you take
Yeah,
money in when you own rentals, but you don't know if that's your money because if the roof has to be replaced in a year, all that money you made for 2 years is gone.
yeah, yeah. Now
So
you're
yeah,
negative.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's wild. That's, I was just taught that from my mentor, like when I first started, and it makes sense to me. Like a lot of the city investors that you're probably talking about, like in the Queens, the boroughs, Manhattan, like they do that. They're like, I don't really care if it cash flows because I know it's gonna be worth,
Yeah,
whatever.
if you're
It's stupid.
if you're in such a good cash position that you can wait a decade,
Right.
2 decades, then great, then do that. For me, but the truth is, even while you're waiting, there's all kinds of expenses. There's taxes, there's problems with tenants, there's repairs, there's maintenance, there's all kinds of crap
Yeah.
that you have to do. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I hate it.
I have like so at my day job, I have some of my investors that I work for, multi-billion dollar clients, and that's what they literally do that. Like they'll buy assets, millions of dollars, sit on them for years, and they'll be paying the interest and all the taxes and everything, and then it works though, but that's
It
on a
works
big
for
scale.
them
It's a big
because
scale they're doing.
correct, because they have so much. So you know what somebody told me recently. I mean, this is interesting. This a couple of years ago, said that the smart money now is buying properties, both residential and commercial, mostly commercial, around private golf courses
Oh,
because
interesting.
they feel eventually the land of the golf course, and this happened near me in Woodmere, is
Yeah,
going to be worth more than the golf course is making, and the golf course is just going to sell. So there's going to be another 200 houses there, and they're going to have
yep,
commercial needs, right? They're going to need a new Dunkin' Donuts. They're going to need a laundromat, whatever the hell they're going to need. So, and I'm like, you got to have a lot of money to bank land and things that you don't even think are worth it now because you hope an event is going to happen. But yeah, but big money could do that, and I
yeah.
wish I had the money to do that.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. You're right. And that's a new for on Long Island. That's kind of the next, or that's the only way to really develop. It's very hard to develop on Long Island because there's not a lot of land, but that's kind of the only way guys are doing it. Like there's a Woodside Country Club by my house. I think they're going to sell, and that's the play. They're going to make it into like condominiums. So that's at schools, like a great
So
area. So,
they had a big fight by me in Woodmere. The country club sold to a bunch of guys in Jersey, and the 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 neighbors came out with pitchforks and torches
yeah.
and said no, and the town of Hempstead rezoned the area as a special district. I cannot believe, and they tried to sue him, and throughout the case, I think they're suing again. I cannot imagine a worse situation. These guys paid like $50 million for this land,
Oh, yeah.
and then they
That's
said, "Sorry, you can't build." And as of right, they could build like 200 houses as of
yeah.
right,
Yeah, as of
and
right.
they said, "No, we rezoned it. You can't build anything."
People just are crazy. They don't like development in Long Island, like on Long Island. Like there's a Facebook group I literally saw it this weekend in my town. There's a East Norwich Inn right behind Rothman's.
Stop the
And
builders.
what's that?
Is it called Stop the Builders?
Right. And it literally just I think is selling to an investor, and they're talking about either uh condominiums or like assisted living, and everyone's freaking out. And I'm like, all right, well, would you rather have a dumpy inn, like hotel inn that's falling apart and no one goes to, or would you rather have something nice? And they're like, oh, I'd rather want anything
The
like
thinking to me is crazy. I'm on the planning board in my village, in the village of Lawrence, and we can look back. I think it's public knowledge. You can look back on every single planning board that ever met, and
yeah,
we only meet when it's as of right or a variance has been given, right? So
yeah,
there's a board of zoning appeals, and then obviously there's always contentious there. But I look back like 40 years ago when somebody split up a lot into two houses, and it's the same thing. People going, it's going to ruin the neighborhood. It's terrible. And I'm like, now one of the members of the planning board is living in that house. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, so we're in part of Lawrence. It's like a minimum of a 1 acre, 1 acre lots. Somebody wants to split up a 2.1 acre plot into two houses, and
Right.
these people go, the traffic is gonna be crazy. Because
Traffic,
of
that's it's
one
always the
extra house,
traffic.
the traffic's gonna be crazy. So
It's
it's the same thing that never stops. People are always trying to just maintain what they have. So
yeah,
when they wanted to build these 200 houses, I really didn't mind, but the neighbor went bananas. They're like, it's an area called the Five Towns. So they said this is going to be
yes.
a six town, and I'm like, it's 200 houses. It's going to be like what is that? 1,000 people? I go, most of these. Each of the five towns is like 6,000, 7,000 people, but
Yeah,
people went bananas and they got what they wanted. And I think it's a crime what they did. I really
yeah,
think that they screwed these guys over. I feel bad for them, but there's always going to be and by the way, so that's the people. But what I found since I've been doing this for a long time
mhm,
is the municipalities really hate rental building. They hate it. They fight it tooth and
okay,
nail. They look at renters as these interlopers that are going to use up our sewer system and our school system and traffic and our parking, and they don't have roots in they aren't really constituents because they may or may not vote.
right.
And like I've been trying to build rentals, and it is a very, 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 very uphill battle to try and get
Yeah.
approved to build rentals anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, no, like, when Hochul was trying to, which
Changes
I
changes
kinda
zone.
make it makes, like, sense when you're like, "We need more inventory, like, let's make detached garage because I have one. Wouldn't you want that as an extra income unit? Like, but,
And
I get
ADUs,
it,
I just came back from Los Angeles. There's
but
everybody's
yeah.
garage is a one-bedroom apartment. It's a guest house. So why wouldn't you have that? It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm, like, split on that because I agree, like, I would want that extra income and, it'd be cool to have, and, um, I don't know, it's, like, tough because then do you want this to be like Queens, like Long Island? Do you want it to be at least where I am, it's not very densely populated, maybe, more Western Nassau is, but I guess it's like, well, do you want it more densely populated or not? I don't know.
And it's a question to be debated, but I think that there's definitely a housing shortage, and if they're not allowing people to build rentals, and there's really is not much more land to build
Right.
houses,
Yeah.
I don't know how they think it's going to resolve itself.
That's how you resolve it, you add more rental
You add
units.
more or you rezone, right? There's a lot of office buildings out there that are empty that can be multifamily, right? But to get anything rezoned is cost a fortune, and you could spend the thing with all these things, you can spend a fortune on it and spend a ton of time on it. And if you have to buy the
Yeah.
property and then they say no, sorry,
Right.
because 12 neighbors came out and said I may not be able to get a parking spot at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just crazy things. It's
It's
a hard
wild. It's crazy.
yeah.
So you started your business in 2012, 13. I know what you do now is a lot of direct to seller marketing to get there, but before when you started, I don't think you were going to like auctions and stuff like that. And it was a
Right.
different market, and I get it.
I went
So
to auctions, right? For 4 years, I bought almost everything at auction, and I went to Nassau County Auction every single Tuesday for 4 years, and, I bought more properties every year, but I was spending 42 days. I spent every Monday doing research on it, and Tuesday, I was basically going to the auction, which took a long time, and then checking out the houses after, so 40% of my time was spent on something that I couldn't control, right? You can't control whether you
yeah,
get outbid. You can't control whether something gets. I remember I bought something and we found that after the guy had filed bankruptcy at like 10:59, the auction started at 11, and like, it took me like 8 months to get my deposit back from the
oh
referee.
shit.
And it's a difficult way to go about doing business because you never know if you're going to get the deal or not. You never know.
Yeah, in theory, I like it because it's like, well, all right, there's endless deals. Like there's just deals that just keep coming and coming. And but the real what I realize is, and you know this, like once something is public, everyone can bid on it, particularly whether it's on Zillow, whether it's on an auction site. Like there's so much competition. And I experienced it a couple times bidding on properties. You've done it a billion times, so you know what it's like. And it's just
By the way, it pulls me back. I have one open here. Or maybe I was smart enough to get rid of it. Well, there it is. There's something on Hubzu now that I keep looking at, and, like, I know it's already too high for me to bid, but I'm still watching and curious what it's gonna go for. So, I find myself getting sucked back into this, but it's a nightmare. Even because when you're bidding on these platforms, the problem is that even when you win, and I've won h probably 100 auctions, you don't win. They don't give you the property because there's
yeah,
some secret reserve price that they're not sharing with you, which I think is so stupid.
I know.
I'm bidding, I'm all excited, this guy, "Oh, I'm gonna get this deal for 400, it's a great buy," and then it says, "Yeah, sorry, the seller said go drop dead." So
Yeah. Yeah,
I
like the
hate.
bank too, like when I won last week, well, I'm sorry, I didn't win, I lost it, but it went back on the market or on auction because the guy who won it wasn't high enough, right? It was like, come
Right, he
on.
didn't meet the reserve. So the what and I'm watching this and I'm playing this like it's a video game and the last anything any bid you make in the last hour or 15 minutes extends it. I've been up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to get a property.
That's wild.
And what happens is at the end, you don't even know if you really win. So it's a little nuts.
Yeah. So you decided to go at some point, you decided to go directly to homeowners in certain situations to get properties. So what do you like? What are you doing as far as the marketing channels, as far as going after these properties? How are you getting them? What channels are you using?
So I use a lot of direct mail. This is return mail for today. You want to see? So I send
Yeah,
send a lot of
I
send a lot
got
of
mine. I got
postcards,
mine too.
you know. So I'm a fan of direct mail. Um, I use a lot of pay per lead now. So I use a couple of services that are basically using their own PPC, which is pay per click, or SEO, which is search engine optimization, and I'm buying leads from them.
Yeah,
I do some cold calling now too, and I do ringless voicemail, although it's hasn't produced much lately. I still do it because it's just cheap and it's easy. Um, that is what I am doing now to get leads. I've been through a lot of different things. I did PPC for a while. I was spending like 20,000 a month on direct to Google, which is crazy.
yeah,
Google will take your money so fast. It's amazing, and it's insignificant to them. Like
yeah,
spend $2 million a day with Google, they wouldn't. It would you barely get on their radar screen because there are companies doing that.
yeah.
So I've been through a lot of different marketing channels. That's what I'm doing now, and I know it's going to change over time, but that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, so I had a call from a digital marketing guy about PPC, and I'm not ready for it at this moment. It's intriguing, but he's like, you got to spend 20 grand a month, like close to 20. Like he said 15, but he's like, well, then you should retarget them, and then you should do like, and it's like, so it adds up to 20 grand a month.
Here's the
And
truth. Whatever agency I can tell you, 'cause I've used agencies, I've used a lot of different third party things. Whatever you use, it's going to take Google some time to figure out what you want.
yeah,
And if you're whatever you're doing, you got to really do it for like 9 months. So you got to budget something that you can do. It's not like, in other parts, our cost, the cost conversion cycle in New York, right? The time between when we spend money on marketing and when we get paid is crazy long, crazy.
yeah,
So just to tell you, when I transitioned after 4 years of buying at auction to spending money on marketing and going direct to seller, so I had money coming in from all these houses that I had flipped, that I had bought at auction. I was spending $20,000 a month in marketing, and I had 4 years of experience of flipping houses and knowing what I'm doing. And it took me 9 months to see a dollar back from the money I was spending. So, like, I have students, I coach people now, and after 3 months, they're like, I don't think this is working. And I'm like, you got to think in terms of a year. You got 12 to 18 months really is what it takes, because it takes so long for us to get a deal, negotiate with the seller, for the seller to decide to finally give it to us. Then sometimes we have to get the tenant out, or we have to do the work on it. That takes time. Everything takes time. So you have to really think in New York in terms of 12 to 18 months. So with PPC, it should be a little quicker. But if you're planning to go get into PPC, and whatever your third party person is telling you it costs, you better start thinking in terms of paying that for 12 months. You can't be
mm,
jumping ship after 3 months. It's a waste of money.
yeah, yeah, because it's all about the average, the means, right? Like the average. Like, yeah, you'll get 1 out of 30 deals, or 1 out of 30 leads will be a deal, let's just say, but you might get it. It could be 1 out of 90. Like you get the 90th guy gets
Right.
you, and then you get two more after that. It's like
Exactly. Exactly.
you don't need to
Exactly.
have deep pockets. So
And you see that with every lead channel. You see people who are jumping out too early. And I've seen people who I admire who have businesses much bigger than mine when I go to Investor Fuel. And they're like, well, I tried X marketing channel, but after 3 months, it wasn't working. And I'm like, that's not enough to know. Really. It really isn't.
yeah,
I'm sorry. That
yeah,
happens all the time. We're
and
all guilty of that. I've done that too. I tried radio for 3 months. I should have stayed in it much longer. It was my mistake.
yeah, and like you said, like with PPC, that's why I'm not ready for it right now because like you said, you need 8, 9 months, 20
You
grand
got
to
to
top.
commit. You got to commit a
Well,
lot of money to it. You have to.
that's almost 200 grand.
Right.
It's
And
a
then
lot of
it may not work, right? You have to pretty much say, I'm going to pump 200 grand into something, and I hope it works. That's the truth.
Yeah, you need brass balls to do that, and
Yeah,
deep
yeah,
pockets. So that's
exactly.
why that's why I just stick to direct mail. It's working. Like I got a deal I'm closing on this month that I'm flipping. I got a listing out of it too. Almost two listings. So I mean, like it's working, but I just started it in September. I'm gonna keep doing it for a couple more minutes. I think I mailed them. This is my third. I'm gonna probably do it at least one more time. I noticed the response rates are terrible. Like worse than I was expecting. Was expecting a quarter of a percent. I'm getting like 0.0018, like very, very low response
I
rate.
believe.
And then
But I
like
gotta tell you, it's a to me, it's a stupid stat. It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter.
All that matters is your return on investment. So if I
Right,
do a mailing of 10,000 that cost me $5,000 and I get one response, I don't know what that is, 0.0001%, but I get a deal out of it that I make 100 grand on, and you
right,
do the same mailing and you get a 1% response rate. So you get 100 times more than me, but you don't make any money on it. Who's better off? People ask me
right,
all the time about response rates. I go, I don't track them. I don't care. I really
right,
don't, especially when when a lot of people calling are telling you to drop dead or take you off the list.
right.
So you're just trying to get enough. You're just trying to get like a 4-to-1 return on your investment. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
That's about it.
So like with this particular mailing, it's my third mailing. I'll definitely mail it a fourth time and then probably more. But the thing is, it's like if I just get this one deal, I would say it's a failure because if I flip it and make, let's say 50K and I mailed it five times, that's almost a wash, right? So like I would call it a failure. So I look at it as how many deals can I get? If I can mail this list five, six, seven times and get four deals, that's definitely success
Of
for
course.
me. So you're right. I don't really care about the response rates. It's
Even
just
if you
can I
get
get,
3 listings, even you get 3 listings out of that'll be another 30 grand. So I mean, it's great. It's
yeah,
worth it.
that's true.
It's worth
Yeah.
it. You can't
So
even. I mean, you got to those listings count. I've done listings where I made 20 grand on them. So you have to. Are you licensed though? Are you going to do listing
yeah,
yourself? What do you do?
I'm
Good.
licensed and I'm going to do the listings. I learned a little bit more how to do it because the first one I kind of gave the listing away because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Now I learned and I'm just like, you know what? Like I have to take those listings down so I can recoup a lot of the marketing costs and
Of
then
course.
just the flips and the rentals. That's all just
I tell everyone in this business they should be licensed. It's stupid to not be. The truth is, in any market, 90% of the houses are going to get end up listed with an agent. For you,
yeah,
you know, another place. Listen, if I was ever inundated with leads, which I've never been in my entire life, I've never had so many leads I couldn't handle them. Then maybe
right.
I could toss the people who wanted full price. But it's harder in New York. It's just harder, and we make so much more on listings. Like in other places where the selling price is $100,000, and it's a 6% listing, and you're gonna get $3,000. I understand saying, well, you know, is it worth my time or to have somebody to do it? But by us, where you're gonna get 2% on a $800,000 sale, it's a lot of money. You know, it
Yeah.
can make or break a it can make or break a marketing campaign.
Right. Well, that's why I'm going to probably shift out of like some of the marketing I'm doing is in mass and stuff and like the resale. If I get a listing there, what am I making like 5 grand, 6 grand on like on my resale 300,000. So you're right. If I'm selling houses double the price in Huntington, then it makes sense. It makes a lot of
For sure.
sense. And it's just like I always tell new investors, and you do this too, get licensed because first off, how are you, not you particularly, but if you're not licensed, how are you analyzing what a deal is worth? How do you even know? Or you're looking at Zillow and recent sales, it doesn't tell you shit. Like you really need to know. MLS
Listen,
is, in my view, the
for
only
sure.
way to know.
For sure. So I say there's 3 reasons that everyone should be licensed. The first is what you just said. You want access to MLS because it is the best way to combat. But
Yeah.
the truth is you got to understand in our areas, MLS is significantly better than anything else. Zillow has not
Yeah.
figured out
Terrible.
our area because our area is such diverse product. But there
Right.
are places, right, in Lubbock, Texas, and in Port St. Lucie, Florida, where Zillow is right 99% of the time because the product is so homogenous. Everything's built after 1980. They know what everything's worth. In our area, you need MLS. The second reason I tell people to do it is is to take listings because if you go on enough appointments, you're going to meet people who just want to list. I remember going to appointments where I thought for sure I'd buy the property, and I'm like, this house is in great condition. You shouldn't list it. And the third one is it's a really good way to build a buyer's list if the situation calls for it, where you can list a wholesale property on the MLS.
Right.
You're not allowed to represent you own it. You have to list it as a contract vendee,
I do, yeah.
but it's a great way to build a buyer's list. So I always tell people and you want to be in control of that. You don't want to use a flat fee listing. I used to use a flat fee listing agent, but those are really the 3 reasons I tell people to get licensed. And you know, there are states where they say it's frowned upon if a a licensed agent who has a fiduciary responsibility is going to buy the property. But I got to tell you, I've never been in a situation in my life. I've never met a seller in my life that was like, I think I should sell. I think I should list it, but instead I'm going to sell it to you for a huge discount. They're selling a discount because they don't want to list it or they can't list it. Some reason
Right.
that prevents them from doing it. So I don't I would love somebody to show me that situation where an investor agent took advantage of someone and bought the property at a discount that the guy really wanted to list it. To me, I can't even imagine it. So I think it's
Right.
foolish to think that there's some kind of lack of fiduciary responsibility of being an investor and an agent. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, that definitely makes sense. You should definitely be licensed. It makes sense. It's good for I didn't think of it for the buyers list though. That's definitely an important factor.
Yeah, I've done it. I've listed properties and I've gotten great buyers. By the way, it's one of the few ways you can really see who a buyer is because when you list something, if there's somebody who wants to buy it, they're going to put an offer in, right? And most of the ways that people who are starting on our business build a buyers list is to get a list and call, and they get bullshit nonstop, right? People answer the phone who are never going to buy a property, and they're like, "Sure, if you want." I mean, you're calling people up and saying, "Hey, if I have something to make you money, should I call you back?" Everyone's going to answer yes, even if the guy's never going to buy a property from you.
Right.
But if you list it and that guy comes in and puts in a real offer, then that's probably a real buyer.
Okay. Oh, interesting. All right. So are you still flipping properties yourself, or I know you wholesale a lot. You help a lot of people do that, particularly in your channel. You get a lot of new investors come to you. That's been a great way for you to meet people. You do host
Yeah.
the RIA and everything like that, but you still flipping properties yourself as well?
So the two things that I hate in this business are dealing with contractors and dealing with building departments, right? Those are the parts that make me that drive me crazy. And so my goal is like to get to zero work, but I'll never get there. Having said that, I'm doing a massive rehab right now in Valley Stream area, which I'm almost done with. And I still hate it, but it happens, right? I buy a property and maybe I think I can wholesale it and I can't, or maybe I think I can wholesale it and I realize it's much worse shape than I thought. So it still happens, but I don't like them, but I still do them.
The townships are terrible. Like I had two examples. One, I just closed out a deal on Thursday, but we were waiting 9 months to get the CO because the seller was selling it
That's fun.
as if they had a CO. Yeah, Brookhaven. It took them 9 months to come out. They said change this, change that, move this.
Crookhaven, yeah.
They are the worst.
Have you been to their massive, beautiful building with hundreds of people doing nothing all day?
Yeah, yeah. It's like
It's
it's just so
amazing.
ridiculous. And then I got one now where we're doing a simple closing out like a demo permit and like that's happening Wednesday. But like in the permit, they want us to dig out what was there. They want to dig it out and they're like leave it so we can come see that there's nothing like you buried anything or whatever. Like that's kind of like leave it there and then we'll do a second inspection. After that, you put the dirt back and then do the second inspection. Like, come on, really? Can't you just come and be like, yeah, there's not a detached
What t
garage here?
what
You
town
know?
what township is that?
That's in Brookhaven.
Oh, so yeah, they're
That's
very
another one.
difficult, very
And I
difficult.
do a lot in Brookhaven, mostly in Brookhaven, which I'm gonna probably pivot to like a different town in Suffolk because I think it's
They're
ridiculous.
tough. They're very tough. They were always tough. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the fact that they'll board up a house and then charge you put a $4,000 lien on the property for it. And to get that, they do that. It's a boarding up fee, and I'm
Jesus.
like, that. First of all, it doesn't cost $4,000 to do that, but they love to throw liens on, and they don't like to take them off. I had a
Yeah.
property in Brookhaven where I got a garbage ticket, a nuisance garbage nuisance ticket, and I didn't know it was there, and go to sell the property, and they're like, "Well, there's this ticket, and we want to hold $3,000 in escrow." I'm like, great, and I paid it off, and it took like 19 months for them to I had to take
Oh,
it from one
wow.
department and bring it to the legal department, and
Oh
and
my
I'm
god.
like, "This is taking over a year for something for a bag of garbage that was outside." Like, it's insanity. There's no thought process going on there.
Would you recommend a different township for me? So I have one list I'm marketing to in Brookhaven, but then I have more capital coming in. I want to just reinvest that into other direct mailing, but I want to choose a different list. I'm doing a high equity list, Brookhaven, very low response rates. I guess it doesn't matter so much, but should I be doing like Huntington? Would you recommend Babylon, Islip? Like who's kind
There's
of better? How's
Listen,
Huntington?
there's pros and cons at all. One of the beauties of Huntington is that this is the only township I know that does this. If there's like a fire and the house is vacant, they dropped the taxes on it to really low. I like to like $1,000 for a
Wow.
mansion.
Wow.
So there's good and bad people in every township. I don't think the only place everyone should avoid is a town North Hempstead in Nassau. That's the worst. There's nothing like that in the world. There's nothing exists like that in the world. It's crazy. You'll see how this is the only place where it's normal to go onto the MLS and see properties that are in contract for 4 years. 4 years because somebody needed to clear something out. There's nothing like that. But other than that, all the townships in Suffolk are similar. Some of them are better than others. You can get somebody at one of the even in Brookhaven, you get somebody who's helpful and things move quicker. So
Yeah.
if you're having success, I wouldn't change because of this. It's just part just that's just part of the how it works.
It just seems to me like this deal, right? That had no CO. I had I had in the contract they have to represent a CO, so I didn't have to take that on. But like that takes massive. You need such a discount to get it to buy it cash without a CO and go through the process and do all the town's bullshit. I mean, you're talking 9 months a year till you're actually like liquidating that property and making money. That
Are you
seems
doing
like to me
you
unreasonable.
doing work did you have to do work to it during that time?
No, it was fully renovated, but there was like they wanted like the porch and the portico in the front to be like a certain like they want hurricane clips, they wanted to take it was just they had so many specific things they wanted done. They had to come back out multiple times for inspections. Just
Yeah.
terrible. It was
Problem
just
the problem is that you do what they want and then they come and find something else. That's the problem, right?
yeah,
Those are the situations that drive you nuts. I mean, there's one inspector who was in charge of Elmont. I used to do a lot in Elmont. That one was like my another number one area. And the guy, every time he came out, it would just be something else. And then they moved him to another area. I mean, I want to throw a party. And then recently I found out I had a house and he had to come to it. And I'm like, I literally said to him, I said, I thought you retired. He's not even that old, but I was just praying that he retired. And it's just that's the way the guy is. He comes and he looks and he finds something else. And that's anybody like that, is a problem. There was an electrical inspector in the town of Hempstead who was just like a nightmare. Like everything just took forever. They finally fired him. It was like a miracle.
good.
I think he said something racist, so they got a chance to get rid of him. But like one guy in your life like that can drive you bananas. It costs you 6 months on a project. It's a lot of money. The whole thing costs like crazy.
I know. I know. And everyone wants so much for their house. It makes it very difficult to then ultimately buy deals at the numbers you want them at.
Right.
So but yeah, so obviously, with a new YouTube channel, you do a lot of you put a lot of content for people, like particularly that are new investors that want to get into this. Do you have any, I guess, advice for new investors? Because this is a tough business, man, to get started in. You wouldn't think so, but it is. Like it's very difficult to actually like understand and get like knowledge to take action. Otherwise, everyone wants to be a real estate investor. They don't realize what it takes. Like
Sure. So
any like
there's a lot
advice
of
for them? Yeah.
yeah, well, there's a lot of good gurus out there, and there are a lot of bad gurus out there. And there are a lot of people that say, if you do this in 3 weeks, you'll have a check for $12,000. So that my advice is don't believe them, right? It takes a lot of time, and a lot of people that are going to get into this, the people with unrealistic expectations, like I just told you, are not going to stay in the business. And a lot of people don't stay in the business. A lot of people get in the business and then leave because they think, well, if I didn't get anything in 6 weeks, or even 6 months, then I must be doing something wrong, or it doesn't work here, or this
Right.
doesn't work, or I'm not the right guy. Sometimes they're right, and most of the time it's just a lack of persistence and consistency. And I think in this business and in most businesses, you need to think in longer term timelines, and you need
Right.
to think of being consistent and persistent and overcoming a lot of obstacles. There's nothing easy. It's a simple business, but it's not an easy business, and people just don't understand that because if you go online, you might think it's really easy.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like I said, the cash conversion cycle is so slow here. The quickest way is to wholesale, but even that could take several months. I actually have one example that I'm working on right now in Levittown. Guy calls me on January 2nd, right? So like beginning of the year. Took a couple weeks to get the contract, but got the contract like 2 weeks ago. And then I'm wholesaling that, making a good amount of money, but like we're gonna close the end of this month. So,
It's
like,
great.
that's pretty quick, like
It's
60
very
days
quick.
and you close on the deal. Um, Now let's hope we get to the closing table, right? There's always things that could happen, but I mean, that's like a really good example of how fast this could be. But generally, my experience is that it takes much longer than 2 months to get the
Much.
money.
Listen, and I'm sure like you buy a lot of owner occupied houses. There are people who really focus on non-owner occupied and vacant houses. So if it's vacant, it can move quicker. But if you're buying a non owner occupied house, very often the seller's not ready to move. right? So if the seller's
Right.
not ready to move, there's no problem with the deal or anything, but it's not going to happen until he's ready to go.
Yeah.
So that happens a lot with me. So yeah, quick wholesale deal for me is 2 months.
Right.
Quick wholesale deal in most of the country is like 2 weeks.
That's right.
Um, but I've had deals go very quick, and it happens. I had a crazy wholesale deal that closed. I think I bought it in October and I sold it in November to an end buyer. Like that was like a miracle. And around the same
Wow.
time, I had a wholesale deal that also closed like in like in 4 weeks. So it can happen, but there's a million things that can slow it down. So you
Yeah.
got to be ready for it to take a longer
Uh,
period of time.
Now, a lot of new people, new investors, they come and they're like, they present deals to me or whatever, and a lot of times these are occupied with tenants, and they don't understand that, like that, how of a process that is, how evictions can be very bad. So I like to run my numbers on the conservative side of the worst case scenario, and a lot of new investors don't really understand that, at least in New York. Like they just
No,
come to me with these crazy numbers with occupied proproperties. Do
right. That
you buy
happens.
occupied, obviously?
I buy a lot of occupied, and I very often are giving sellers two numbers. So I'm like, as you said, sellers don't understand. So very often I'll get a seller who will say, "Well, there's a tenant in there, but he'll leave as soon as I want him to." And I'm like, "Okay, great."
Yeah,
So
hearing
I'm
all
like, "This is the number that I'll pay you if it's vacant, and I'm gonna give you a lower number, and sometimes significantly lower, depending on where it is, if it's occupied." And I've had people, sit and wait for a year to get them out, and I've had people who go, "I can't take it anymore. I just want to get them out."
that.
So, yeah, knowing the eviction process is helpful, knowing how long it takes, and it changes, right? The moratorium really screwed everything up for a long time.
Yeah,
Now we're pretty much out of it. So you need to know how it works in your area. Obviously, the 5 boroughs take much longer
yeah,
than Nassau or Suffolk, but, something crazy like the Suffolk County Sheriff's, not being, available to it. It's crazy because these guys didn't do
yeah,
much for the whole moratorium, and
yeah,
then they wouldn't work late shifts after the moratorium, and they would do like one eviction a day. It's like I think it's crazy. They should have been
right,
doing three a day. There was
exactly.
I had situations where it was a 9 month. I got the order to evict, and it was like 9 months before the sheriff said they'll get to me. It's insanity.
That's
So
unbelievable.
things like that happened, and things like that cost me a lot on some deals. So there's nothing
Yeah.
you could do about it. You have to know how it works.
That's what I was talking to an eviction attorney a week ago, and that's what he told me. He's like, you can get someone out in a few months and like out there and patch like mastic. But he's like, the sheriff's the problem. He's like, you can't get the sheriff there for 3 months. It's like, what
It's
the fuck?
to me, it's unacceptable. I really don't. I
Yeah,
don't. And I think they do a great job, but they have to work harder and put in, I think it's just crazy for a landlord to be fighting with a tenant for 6 months and then wait 3 months for the sheriff to get there. That's to me, it's insanity.
yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, 'cause that eats into your bottom line ultimately. Um, Oh, last thing I was gonna talk about, rentals. I know you have a couple rentals. I have a couple rentals. I think it's very I found that like rentals are great, but they require cash. Like people think you can do like a burr and truly
Right.
refi out. And it happens. Like I know guys that have done that, but it's very difficult. You really have to get a property so cheap, which is obviously harder and harder the lower you go. And so a lot of times you're gonna buy them where I'm but looking like in the 250s, maybe lower, and then you're gonna put in like 50 or 60. Um, and in that scenario, like you have to refi, and you're probably gonna be out of pocket like 50 grand, 40 grand, something like that. So
Yeah.
so that just sucks. Like what's your experience with that? It's hard to do rentals here in Long Island, I feel like.
So I won't buy a rental unless I project that I can get my money back, right? At least,
Yeah,
almost all of it. And then sometimes it ends up being not being all of it, but it's close
yeah,
because I don't have unlimited funds, and I think, I get students coming to me and they go, "I have this great deal in Queens. It's worth 500 and I could buy it for 475." I'm like, "Okay, how's that gonna work? How are you ever gonna get your money out?" They go, "What do you mean, how do I get my money out?" I go, "Well, you're gonna put your money into this, and you're
right,
never gonna get it out, ever, right?
right,
So if you're willing to do one rental in your life, then do it." I go, "But otherwise, you need to buy that at, like, 325, right? So
right.
you have to." That's the way I look at it. So as you said before, I need significant equity to the point where I can get, 70% loan is gonna get me all my money out or almost all of it,
Yeah,
and then I need to be significantly cash flow positive. I don't get into deals where I can't get that equity, and it's not easy to find. You're 100%. I closed on something last
yeah.
week in Queens. That's pretty cheap, but I need to do a lot of work to it now to get it out of there, to get my money out of there.
Yeah, and if you're not taking all your money out of it, like you really need a lot of cash. Like I hear
No,
investors say,
yeah,
what's that?
nobody has unlimited cash for sure.
Right, yeah, you need a lot of like, so my initial, mentor kinda taught me going to rentals, there's a lot of reasons why you should do rentals first, like, if you don't
Who's your mentor?
Carl Chavon.
Sure,
I don't
sure.
coach them anymore, but I used to coach them as of, like, last year, my coaching ended. But so there's reasons why I think some people should do rentals first. Like if you don't have the contracting crew down, go into rentals because if you do like a shitty job on the flip, you're never gonna sell that thing.
Right, right.
So definitely go into rentals for that reason. But if you're just gonna go into rent, like get your feet wet, is what I'm trying to say. But initially, I think you really got to flip and wholesale as well because that's where you're going to be able to make income to then have that money to recycle into the rentals. So that's the
Listen,
way I look at it.
I agree, but in our area, I think it's much harder to find a rental than it is a flip because,
Yeah,
there's only handful of areas in Long Island and
yeah,
almost nowhere in the 5 boroughs where you can find something cheap enough that you're gonna be cash flow positive because our purchase price is so high that our debt service is very high and our taxes are very high. So,
yeah,
like, most of Long Island's at least $1,000 a month just in taxes, and
yeah.
then you're paying $400,000 for a discounted house. Your debt service is gonna make your property not cash flow positive. So,
Exactly.
how many places we can probably count them on 2 hands of the places where you can find
Yeah.
deals for rental, right?
Yeah, the
Maybe
ways I only see it in Mastic Beach, Shirley, some
Shirley,
pockets of Shirley, Bellport, like North
Bellport,
Westport. Maybe you could say some areas of Patchogue,
maybe Wyandanch,
maybe
maybe
Coram. There's like a sliver of areas in
very
Coram,
sm
very small. Like
very small.
so that's where I'd say you could probably buy them, but it's difficult because then everyone else is competing on them. Unless you can get like a two family outside of that area, you could probably make it work.
Right,
But
if you have more than 1 unit, it can be cash flow positive, but on a single family, it's very, very hard.
very hard.
Very hard,
Yeah, 'cause
and,
it's not a lot of inventory, and you got all the competition because everyone wants rentals in Long Island, right? So you have everyone looking in these areas, so it's not like once there's a deal, it's very like it gets bid up very high if it's
absolutely,
competition.
so I think if you're limiting yourself to rentals, you better be looking at multi-units or you're gonna have a tough time finding them.
Yeah, I've considered going out of the state. Like I've two markets I'm looking into is Memphis and Tulsa. So I'm wondering if I could do it there. Do I like I know the landlord tenant laws are great over there.
Definitely
Um,
better than ours, that's for sure.
yeah, and you could buy them cheap. So I think that's like I would consider that. I'm gonna look into it more before I like make a
You
decision
gotta
because
look, but you gotta know also you're competing there with hedge funds because there are hedge funds buying anything that they can get an 8% or a yield on, so you can get them. People do them, but but
that's a good point.
sometimes you can get them under contract and then flip them to a hedge fund. I
Yeah,
know guys doing that.
yeah,
Like, these places were paying more than ARV because they only care about yield, they don't care about the value.
that's wild.
So, but it's just something to be aware of there.
That was something I was gonna mention earlier. I forgot. Open Door, isn't that like one of those sites where you could just type in your address, they give you an offer, and that isn't that a hedge fund or something, or that goes to
Yeah,
BlackRock?
yes,
I was talking to my digital marketing guy. He's from Texas, so like that's big out in that there. But
big.
I was like looking here, and they don't buy in Long Island, at least not in my area. So like that's very good for us as investors. We don't have that competition.
So listen, before the pandemic, that was what all the people across the country were saying. How are we gonna compete with these iBuyers? So Zillow was buying,
Yeah,
Open Door, OfferPad, all these places. And some guys were like, "We're in deep shit. We're never gonna get out of here." And then other guys were like, "No, idiots." And these
yeah,
guys were smart. They're like, "You buy the property at whatever you think you could buy, and then you sell it to them, and it works." And they were doing it. They were showing how they're so slimy. Like Open Door will offer you $500,000 for your house. Like this is amazing. But then you look in the fine print, and there's like a 8% marketing fee and a
yeah,
3% bullshit fee, and you have to use their insurance company. You have to use them
yeah.
for everything. You gotta use them for title, you gotta use them for closing, and, like, it could be more than 10% less than their price when they're done, right?
Right.
And I have people come to me, and there are some areas where Open Door will take will dabble in our area. They weren't
Okay.
even existed didn't exist here until a year ago.
Yeah.
But some areas you put in your address and just go, "Sorry, we're not buying there." Some addresses, it'll give you an estimate, but so I think I had one seller once who said, "I got an offer from Open Door." I'm like, "Be very, very careful. They do not give you what they say they give you."
Interesting.
So yeah, was an advantage. I never worried about the iBuyers in our area, but there are people in the Sun Belt, where they've been competing with them for a long time. But I think a lot of these companies, I don't know how long they're going to make it work. I think a lot of them are going to take a beating over time because they can't manage. It's very hard to scale this on a large basis to scale construction and scale management. It's very hard.
You don't think it's a big risk to our business model, like going down 5, 10 years from now? Because imagine you have someone show up, let's just say you have an iBuyer, they type in the site, like, they get a package in the mail. All right, put this camera in there, it scans everything. AI can then analyze it eventually, not right now because the technology is probably not there, but then they could say, all right, well, now we think the house is worth X, and then they give you the offer. Like that's essentially
No,
what we do. We go in the
I don't
process, we look at
I
it.
don't think they can really make it work in New York. It's so dramatically different. I didn't realize for many years how incredibly different real estate is in New York than it is
Yeah,
everywhere else. So I think we're pretty safe because a lot of these guys cannot make it work in New York. It's really 49 states versus New York. In 49 states,
wow,
it's real estate transactions with a buyer and a seller. In New York, it
right,
happens with the seller's attorney and a buyer's attorney. These guys do not have they don't have the inclination to change their model for something that's very different than anywhere else. Plus, the
interesting,
numbers don't make sense. They're only buying to rent. They're not really buying to flip. They fix up to rent.
right,
And 90% of the properties that we have don't work on a rental basis. They give you zero
right,
yield. So it's
yeah,
negative yield. So I don't think we have to worry about them really because I think
okay.
where we are is so different.
That's one of the advantages to New York, at least Long Island.
It
Like,
is
if you don't think iBuyers are coming into this market, and that's where we primarily invest, that seems like an advantage to invest in New York and Long Island. And everyone else that we talk to, the new investors are like, "I'm going out of state. I'm going out of state." I didn't realize that until very recently that fuck, just stay here, man. This just seems like a great market to invest
there
in.
are a lot of advantages to there are a lot of disadvantages and challenges to New York, but there are a lot of advantages to New York. People don't even understand. Like we don't have contract fallout. It happens 1 in a million, right? But in most of the country, you go to contract, that guy gets to the table and sees your wholesale and change his mind. And he's like, F you. And that's it. It's really easy to get into contract out of state. It's really easy to get out of contract out of state. For us, it's really hard to get into contract, but it's impossible to get out of contract. So that's a
Exactly.
huge advantage people don't figure in.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of advantages to New York. People just
they
don't see
choose
them
to.
because of the challenges.
They look at the challenging of a high purchase price as a barrier for them to enter, and they go, "I'm gonna look at a state," and
No,
and
also
and, and the landlord tenant laws, and they go, "I'm going out of state." But there's
for
ways
sure.
around these things.
I understand that, and for rentals, I understand that, I do. But in general, if they go online to a guru who says, "Take a contract out of your pocket at
Right,
the kitchen table, puts it across the street, and you don't have to give a deposit," and they think that that's an enforceable contract, it's just not enforceable in New York because
right,
it's just not the way it works, right? And when they tell you, "Don't worry, you can use standard contract that I'm giving you, that's assignable," and then the guy in New York uses the standard New York state contract, which has
right.
clause 26, which is not assignable. Just
Understandable.
New York is just dramatically different. There's just no other way to put it. That's one of the reasons why I started posting because I think there was nobody really talking about how different it was in New York.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's good stuff, man. So how can people reach out to you, find you if they want to reach out and just connect with you? How can they do that?
I think I'm everywhere. You can get me on Facebook at Real Property Buyers or Bigger Flips. I'm on YouTube. Bigger is my Bigger Flips is my show. I'm on Instagram. Bigger Flips. I'm on TikTok. Bigger Flips. I think I'm all over. You can find me, and almost every post I put my office number so you can reach me. You can call me at the number that's on there. Certainly on YouTube, my office number is on every single post that I put out there.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. You heard it first, guys. Go reach out to Mike. Check out his YouTube channel. Ton of hours and upon hours of information on there. That's how I found you initially. And I like when I first started, and I think it's a great resource. So go check out his stuff, man. I really appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for coming on, man. And
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you too.
absolutely. All right. Take care, man. Bye bye.
Bye bye.